Bertinelli. I'm the Clemson University Cooperative Extension. I'm a home hort agent in Aiken and Lexington counties. And we're going to talk a little bit about fire ant biology. So the fire ant mounds have to start somewhere. There's going to be a male and a female. When you look at these two right here, the female's on the left. She's a nice uniform brown color, got a nice brown head. But when you look at the male, we call them buffalo ants. They're all black. They've got a big head, a big back, and then you'll notice that they've got a little small head. They've only got one job, so they don't need a lot of brains here. That's why they're shaped like that. When you're looking at all of the life forms in an ant mound, you'll find that there's going to be the eggs. There'll be larvae. Now, there's two different types that you'll find. You'll find some of the smaller ones. These are going to turn out to be the workers. And then you'll also see some of the larger larvae and the larger pupae, which are going to become the reproductives or the alates. Now, just to give you an idea of what's going on, whenever you're having a mating flight, you have the potential, each mound has the potential to have 4,000 to 6,000 alates per mature mound per year. And if you've got 50 to 80 mounds per acre, you've got the potential to have 200 to 480,000 alates per acre per year, which means there's going to be a lot of ants. But we're going to get lucky here because the newly mated queens, they're pretty vulnerable. They're big and clunky, and so they're vulnerable to predators like lizards and frogs, other ants. They're going to be a victim of the environment, especially if it's really hot. They'll end up getting fried on the hot sand, and then they're also victims of poor judgment. Just like any girl who's attracted to shiny things, the females, sometimes whenever they're coming down from their mating flight, they'll end up getting caught in the water on a shiny vehicle, and they end up perishing there. So whenever the mated female has her mating flight, she comes down. She's going to remove her wings because she doesn't need them anymore. The male has already died. So she's going to remove her wings and start looking for a place to start her new mound. She'll find a suitable area. She will build a small capsule around herself, go down in the dirt, build a small capsule around herself, and she's going to start breaking down those wing muscles because, remember, she's removed her wings, so she's going to be using those for energy. She's not going to be eating. She's going to be losing weight, but she's going to lay her first batch of eggs. The eggs are going to hatch into larvae. The larvae, she's going to be feeding them oil from her crop, protein secretions from her salivary glands, and then she's also going to produce some infertile eggs to feed to the larva. Once these larvae go through their life cycle, they'll pupate, and then the first set of workers, the adults, they're going to be called minims. These things are going to be her nurses, and they're going to start taking care of her and start grooming her. And now she's going to be the queen. So after about a month, these new workers are going to go out, open up that mound, begin foraging, and also begin mound construction. And by this time, the queen's going to be producing several hundred eggs per day to get her colony going. So the first 3 months or so, you may not see the mound visible in the graph, especially if it's in high traffic or if it's a lot of sand. But by about 6 months, you can see the mound. Most of the time, it'll be 3 to 6 inches wide, maybe an inch or so tall. And what Jason was talking about earlier, whenever you see this mound, you need to think of it like an iceberg. There's going to be a little bit on top, but there's a lot more down below. And as Jason said, he mentioned that there's going to be a hard crust outside. Now remember, this is mostly going to be clay and loamy soils. If it's a sandy soil, it's going to be a little bit shorter and you may not notice it, but there's going to be a hard crust on top. And then there's going to be these lateral tunnels out to the sides, but whenever you break this thing open, you'll see the structures inside, and you can see how all the tunnel systems work, and they're going to use this for regulation of the temperatures. So whenever the queen has started her mound, the mature colonies are going to be 24 to 40 inches wide, maybe 15 inches tall. They'll have the potential, they only hold about 400,000 workers maximum, but by then the queen's going to be laying her eggs in weight a day, and depending on her size, it can be up to 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 eggs a day. So a little bit about the biology. The adults are going to have their mating flight. The females come down. She's going to lay her eggs. The eggs are going to hatch in about a week. And then the larvae are going to pupate over a series of days. And there'll be 4 instars, and that's going to be important in a minute. Once the larvae, they're going to go through their larval stages, all of their moltings. There'll be a pupal stage that lasts about 9 to 16 days, and then the adults are going to emerge. Now, the smaller fire ants, they live 60 to 90 days. Some of the larger fire ants, y'all remember the scale that Jason showed you with some small fire ants and the big fire ants. The smaller ones are going to live 60 to 90 days. The larger ones live 90 to 120 days, and then the queen can live up to 7 years. Did y'all hear that? 7 years. So the important part about the instars are that y'all have heard about using all sorts of home remedies to treat for fire ants, but the adult fire ants are not eating anything solid. They bring that food back to the 4th instar larva, and the 4th instar larva is the only one that's able to process large amounts of protein. They're going to produce amino acids, they're going to, and some soluble proteins, and they're required for egg production. Now, what these 4th instar larvae are going to do is that they're going to process all the food in the mound. So the adults are going to bring back the food to the 4th instar larva. The 4th instar larva has a pouch where the food will sit. They'll regurgitate some enzymes to break down the food into a liquid form. And then the nurse ants are going to come over to the larva, stroke the larva with her antennae, and have the larva regurgitate the liquid food. Now the adult ant is going to take that and feed that all throughout the mound. So the nurse ant has stroked the larva. They gave up the liquid food. That adult is going to go to another worker, or it's going to go to the queen, stroke her with her antennae, and then they're going to share this food. The sharing of the liquid food is a process called trophallaxis. So that's how food is distributed through the mound, and that's also how the insecticides that you use are going to be shared throughout the mound. Now, I mentioned nurses in here. So they've got some jobs in a fire ant mound, and their job depends on their age, the ant's age, and what the colony needs. It doesn't have anything to do with the size of the ant. It has to do with how old the ant is. So the younger ants are going to be nurses, where they feed and groom the queen and the brood. The middle-aged ants are going to be the reserves, where they're working on colony maintenance, sanitation, and defense. And then the older ones are going to be the foragers. Now, the time in each function depends on the size and what the colony needs. Depends on the size of the colony and what the colony needs. It doesn't have anything to do with the body size. And it's not to say that once you're 60 days old, your job's going to change. That's not necessarily what it means, but they do have a system in which they go through their jobs. Now, how do fire ants spread? Fire ants spread a bunch of different ways. There's transport of colonies or mated queens in nursery stock, sod, and soil. That's why the federal quarantine's in place. I mentioned that the gals like shiny stuff. So those newly mated queens, they're going to be transported in pickups, on railroad cars, on trailers, things like that. And then also, you have to know that fire ants are a floodplain insect. So they do this thing called rafting, and that's what this picture on top is. It's whenever the water level rises and say it ends up displacing a fire ant colony, the workers will take turns being on bottom. They'll put the queen, the reproductives, and the brood in the middle of this ever-moving ball of workers, and everybody takes turn being on the bottom. But it keeps everybody alive. They don't break the surface tension. They end up rafting to somewhere safe, and that's how colonies can spread. And then also through natural mating flights. Whenever the fire ants, the reproductives, are having their mating flights, they go several hundred feet up in the air. They mate. Well, they come back down. Well, think of the wind currents that are up there. Unaided, a fire ant female can fly a couple miles. But with a good tailwind, she can get up to 12 miles. So that's big-time spread right there. And with that, we come to the next speaker.